Yeah, thank you. I'm sure I'll be rusty and just getting back into it, but I just do it for fun. We'll see.
Yeah, you might have to edit like an hour out of this to
Yeah.
to make it
or
something. But
hey, or if it's so good, 2 different episodes. Changing gears a little bit. One of the topics that hit close to home and probably was one of the biggest issues that drove a wedge between people, other than, COVID was, I think, all the race issues and police shootings and everything.
oh, absolutely.
Which hits close to home with my experience of race and people in my family experience with race. And what do you think should be the church's role in that conversation? Because I know I get in a space where, why hasn't so-and-so priest, bishop, whatever, said something about this? I see all these Catholic people posting about May the 4th be with you, but I haven't seen them say anything about a police shooting. What is the church's role in that conversation? We have a few documents that broach the topic, but what would you say the church's place is in it? A lay Catholic, what's our part in the conversation?
I think for Catholics, it should be where it's always been, which is, letting the guidance of Christ and the love of neighbor, let that guide our treatment of anybody, everybody, of where we were with the civil rights movement of the 60s. Pope Paul VI met with Martin Luther King Jr. Martin Luther King Jr. had a great, well, it was reported he had a very positive experience with Pope Paul VI, and he called him a friend to the African American people and in what they were living through, in spite of all the terror and the racism, the segregation, everything they were dealing with in the 1960s. And Pope Paul VI wrote against racism. He wrote like the church has been consistent about that. Like, this is a bad thing. Like, stop doing it, please. So it's got to be something that's removed from politics, and so much of the conversation about race is wrapped up in politics, and people have drawn their lines in the sand and tend toward a bias, whether they are aware of it or not. And I was guilty of this a while ago as well. And I have friends who still default to this, where if a black person is killed, they're immediately skeptical. They're like, okay, well, let's look at the context. Let's
what
see
they do.
what did they do?
Must be their fault.
They obviously deserved it. Like, the cop wouldn't respond to this if he didn't do something. And then they'll bring up the record, be like, oh, well, he was also convicted for this like 15 years ago, so he's obviously a bad apple. I mean, he's a criminal. He was, and so there are these unfair generalizations, there are these unfair biases, there are these unfair just characterizations of people that overlook who they are as people, as bearers of the image of God, as sons, as fathers, brothers, sisters, mothers, wives, girlfriends, as people who have families, who have like this real lived experience in the world. And how cold and callous and inhumane is our treatment of them when we reduce them to a statistical anomaly. We're just seeing this because it's what the news wants to report, because it gets the clicks, which may be true to a certain degree. I mean, it does. Fear, outrage, anger, like those do drive sales, but that doesn't diminish the reality or the truth that, a person was killed, and it was possibly due to systemic racism in our nation. If we look back in America's history, America alone, like we've been very anti-immigrant since our inception, which is completely ironic because where did we come from? We emigrated here to America, and then we hated anybody else that did it. The Italians, the Irish, they got the brunt of it at the turn of the 20th century. The late 1800s, Italians were being killed in the streets, for no other reason than they were Italians. And that's part of the reason the Knights of Columbus got so popular. That's part of the reason why Christopher Columbus was lifted up as an icon. In spite of the reality of his history, the icon of Columbus in America is different, and we have to recognize that. And Columbus became a rallying cry for Americanism, and that's why so many people adopted that image, and part of the reason why we have the Knights of Columbus here. But modern issues, there's just this lack of humanity, and I think that's where the church needs to return to, like to the activism that we had in the civil rights movement. When I saw some priests' response to, George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and countless others, it was just cold and callous. As opposed to, in the 1960s, priests, religious sisters were walking hand in hand, arm chains with our Black brothers and sisters, like through the streets demanding justice. And I did see examples of that. I did see some priests and bishops stand for that, and that was beautiful. But I saw so few examples of that.
Yeah.
And I think that's where we need to return. And outside of that, stop me because I'm going to get worked up. Outside of that, like our Hispanic brothers and sisters, like where I worked, there was such division. Like they said, like the white community would say, we're one church, but we're two parishes. They have their
I've heard
mass.
the exact same thing,
dude.
Yeah,
it broke my heart because back then, what was this, 2007 onward? The issue wasn't, critical race theory. The issue wasn't, Black people and systemic racism. That may have been part of the conversation, but the greater part of the conversation was immigration. Immigrants are coming to steal your jobs. We need to build a wall. It wasn't as amped up as the rhetoric of this past 5 years, but it was there. And all I heard from other Catholics in my parish, like, well, they're illegals. They're not people, they're illegals. Like, and that's what we characterize them as. We put them in this box, and we said, like, instead of like, you're a human person endowed with the image of your creator, you're an illegal. You broke the law. You get what you deserve. You need to be deported. And I was like, this is outrageous. But I was like one of the few people actually engaging the Hispanic community in what capacity I could. And it was culture shock for me because when I was at Franciscan University, I was very active with the Latinos for Christ. I was a white boy. I wasn't officially part of Latinos for Christ, but I was with them all the time because they throw baller parties and they know how to dance and they know how to cook. And I loved it. And they were great. They were very welcoming to me, this stupid kid. And just fantastic people. So coming to a church where I saw such division, I was like repulsed. So when I tried to engage them, I formed some friendships that I still have to this day, but it took them years to finally confide in me. They'd be like, oh, Billy, by the way, our parents are illegals. You want us to come to your youth group. How could we, when your people hate us? Like, that's what it came down to. And that's what they told me. And I was like, I couldn't believe I was hearing this. And I was like, dude, I'm so sorry. And they're like, yeah, well, the path to citizenship is a long one. They've been trying to become citizens for 9 years, but they're still illegal. Like, they could still be deported at any minute. So when you hear, like, when we disappear, when we hear about ICE raids, like, those are real fears for us because we've had friends and family just taken. And so, like, it's just a lack of engagement of humanity and really recognizing that it's not as simple as saying, they broke the law, therefore XYZ needs to happen, And with the current racial climate, especially with our Black community, it's needing to recognize how can we as persons remove ourselves from the historical context of America exploiting Black people, African people, for slave labor and building a nation on that slave labor, like investing so much capital into that. How do we divest ourselves? How do we remove ourselves from that history? That's like asking a German born today to remove themselves from the contextual history of what Germany did to the Jews in the 1940s. Like if you met a German who said, well, that didn't involve me. You can't blame me for that. You can't look at me like what does that have to do with me? Well, you're German. Your nation did this. Like, how do you as a German respond to that? Like there's a difference there with America. There's this radical individualism that we have adopted where we say like all that matters is what I do as a person. I can divest myself from my parentage. Like I don't like, sure, my mother and father gave birth to me, but I don't have them in my life anymore. Like, cause screw them, or any manner of things, where we just try to remove ourselves from necessary historical contexts that have shaped the culture and shaped who we are. It's unintelligible to a certain degree, right? Like how can you do that and remain a coherent person who can communicate themselves if you are absent from your historical context?
Yeah.
Like what is that?
You're separating yourself from reality. Like
Yes, yeah.
reality doesn't necessarily mean that you're bad. It's like here's the reality of history and where we're at now. On top of that, like you mentioned, we're image bearers. I mean, Jackie Hill Perry, that's like her big thing. Like we are all image bearers, and we forget that, or we don't want to take the time to think about that because we have the right answer. And the answer is you're wrong. You did something bad. You're not like me. You're not from here. I remember seeing someone I deeply care about post on Facebook a few years ago where they're saying, how dare these mothers from South America send their children across the border? They're going to be raising criminals because they're encouraging them to break the law.
Yeah.
And I was just like, did you just, have we stopped and thought, at what point, what has to happen? Because you obviously have not experienced it. What has to happen for a mother to send their child across, a country, across the desert, coyote infested areas, cartel infested areas to get to America? What has to be so bad that they'll risk that,
Yeah.
And then ask, okay, well, what would you do in that situation? I'll stay right where I am. Oh, really?
Well, I wouldn't break the law.
Yeah, you wouldn't try to leave when the leader of the cartel is saying that, like, if you don't give your daughter to him as his next wife, then he's going to put a bullet in all of your family. Like,
right, exactly.
I've heard these stories, and it's like, but no, they're breaking the law. It's like, you wouldn't try getting out of there. I mean, like, we have people who are getting arrested over not wearing a mask. Yeah. We're being persecuted because we have to wear a mask, but you won't leave cartel ridden areas.
Right. No, you're right. Like that's another insightful comment. Like people who say, no, I wouldn't break the law are the first ones out there disobeying mask mandates.
Mm-hmm.
They're the first ones out there breaking social distancing. They're the first ones out there, not respecting a private company's right to enforce certain standards for their customers. They believe, like, you can see this all over Twitter, where there's this systemic injustice against conservative voices and they're being booted from public platforms, and that's such an injustice. But they are incapable of seeing that if that's possible for conservative voices on private platforms like Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, how could that not be possible in other areas for other communities? Like there's just no thought. There's nothing beyond the individual and my individual rights. And then you throw in Catholic moral theology with it, and it's like, well, to disobey a law is a sin, and it could be a mortal sin. So in any case, you should obey all laws. Romans 13 says that we have to be subject to governing authorities. Well, what about the mask mandates? Well, that's not a just law, So they'll give nuance to themselves. They'll justify their behavior, but they can't extend that to anybody else, as if other people don't have their own motivations that might be reasonable. It's bizarre.
How would you advise people who may be willing to hear the things you're saying, and how do people get to a point where we stop and see that we're image bearers? Like, I know for us, we're like, it's what we do as Christians, but for someone who's not doing that, how would you have a conversation with someone saying, like, let's not forget who they actually are, not just an illegal, not just a rule breaker or a law breaker? How do you get someone there?
Yeah. That's very difficult. Because for me, as a youth minister, when I was in my position, I was, of course, grateful to have whatever teens would come to our youth group, right? Like, so I couldn't really judge them, but to a certain degree, no, I don't want to say that. I loved our regulars. Let me put it that way. I loved our regulars, the kids that you could depend on who would come, right? They're great.
Yeah.
But who I really looked for, who I really searched for, were the outcasts, the kids who didn't want to be there, the kids who felt left out, the kids who felt like they didn't belong, like
even the hard cases.
Yeah, the hard kid. Yeah, everybody, like those kids were the kids I wanted to reach. Like the regulars, great. I'm very happy. I love them. I have great engagements with them too. But those, what is it? Christ, the physician doesn't heal the healthy. He comes for the sick, So I'm grateful that they're there. But I really want to reach the kids who don't want to be there. And I remember one kid, shoot, his name escapes me right now because this, which is shameful on my part. I remember meeting him as a freshman, and he, like we all were, scared freshmen, right? We don't know where we fit in. We just got out of 8th grade. We just graduated middle school. So we don't know where we fit in the pecking order in high school, right? We just know that we're freshmen and that we're scared because this is a new world. And I just like reached out to him. I welcomed him in. I was like, come on in. Like, what's your name? And then I, introduced him. I was like, all right, come over here. Like, meet these guys. Like, what are you into? And like, do you like Minecraft? Do you like, I would just start spouting off stupid stuff, just to find like one point of engagement. If I can reach them, like in their video games or their books that they're reading or the anime that they're watching or the music they're listening to, find that point of engagement. And, after that, he became a regular at my group, and it was so rewarding to see that, and he came up to me a couple months later and he said, hey, can I talk to you for a second? I said, yeah, sure. He's like, I just want to thank you for, this group here. I was like, what do you mean? Because it didn't like register that I did anything special, because I just treated him like I would treat anybody else. And he's like, well, I didn't know I was part of the group until you reached out to me. Like, I didn't know. I was like, what are you talking about? Of course you are. You're like, you're one of the coolest kids here. We love having you. He's like, yeah, but I didn't know that. Like, I was just like, this is so cool, and like, that's what I wanted to do. We welcome the broken. We welcome the lost. Like the church is a hospital for sinners, not a museum for saints. And the effort it takes to break out of a bubble to start viewing people as people is so hard. Like it's hard to break out until you come face to face with a conflict that challenges your presupposed beliefs about a people, a culture, a specific person in your life. But that's the temptation that we always have to fight against, I think, as Christians, is this temptation to judgment. Because you'll hear that in your conservative circles. The response to, well, judge not, lest ye be judged. Like we hear the quote liberals throw that out at Christians all the time, and then the Christians respond, "We can judge actions. We don't judge people. We don't condemn you to hell. We judge your actions, and your actions are evil."
Mm,
Well, yeah, that may be true, but that doesn't help the conversation. That doesn't allow you to engage with the person. Like,
right.
if you come at me, saying like you're evil, what you're doing is evil, like then I'm not gonna listen to you.
Mm,
But if you engage me, you try to know who I am, like Jesus dining with the sinners and the tax collectors and the hypocrites and the prostitutes, um, then maybe like I will give you ground for hearing, like, and if we're not establishing that ourselves, then we're really, just failing to uphold the call of the gospel.
mm,
Um, and I'm not good at it, like I challenge people all the time. Like I'm not kind. I wish I was. I try to be, but um, I don't know what the answer is to getting other people to do it other than presenting them with examples of mercy and compassion.
mm. Yeah. Because I think what you did, we think of as super simple, but it's not the cut and dry answer. It's the journey. You invested in him. What are your interests? What drives you? And you built relationship, which then brought him into community, relationship, family. A couple of my uh, proudest moments in ministry, a couple of them were a parish I was working at it, and there was never any closure. It was just the fact that the moment happened. I still think is beautiful. Where one girl who had become part of like the group, coming to everything, um, and then there's she was a senior, and I think she had a boyfriend who was maybe like a freshman in college, and she asked if he could come to one of our functions. Like, yeah, I was like, it wasn't like our main big event. It was like an extra. It was just a night where we kind of, those who wanted to go a little bit deeper. It was normally 14, 15 people. So like, yeah, that's fine. He can come, and he came. I met him. We had a good conversation. I think he lived with his mom, and I think he was brought up kind of basically atheist. So she's like, he may be uncomfortable. He may not want to talk. And I was like, that's totally fine. He doesn't have to, pray or engage or anything. He's welcome to be here. And it was fine. It went over great. I did notice during closing prayer, he got a little uncomfortable, but it was fine. Afterwards, I went to talk with him and just kind of shoot the breeze, and everything was great. They left. And then afterwards, she sends me this long text telling me about how they met as coworkers at the store, and they started dating. But it wasn't until a few months later into their relationship, like a month or two later, where she found out he was actually a she. Like, I met him, I couldn't tell that it was actually a girl. I could not tell. And so in her message, she just said, "I'm not gay. I don't like girls, but as we've been so good for each other, and I've grown, and I've become such a better person with this person, that I don't see a reason to break it off because everything is so good. I don't like girls, can more like point that out, but like, this is so great and so good for me and for both of us. We've both grown." And so my only response back to her was just like, "I'm so glad you felt comfortable to share that with me, and just know that you and," I don't remember what I said, if I said he or she, but I was like, "you both are welcome here. There's no reason I'm going to treat you any different."
Exactly.
And then at my mission, this is more, kudos to my fellow missionary, where one of the guys who've been coming actually like came out to us. He's like, "I want to let you guys know I am gay," and we're like, "All right, fine, like you're welcome here." And that summer we started a D&D group. So it was like once a week we had a group of like 10 teens who were coming for like 3-4 hours to play
That
D&D.
is incredible. Oh my
I was
gosh.
always hoping we'd get in trouble. Like, I hope someone complains about this. And he actually brought a friend with him who was a girl. And we didn't find out later that, first of all, he actually took a screenshot of the conversation between him and his friend, between her and her mom, where in the text it said, "Can I go play D&D at the church?" She's like, "Where? Like, are they allowed to do that? Can they play
Oh my
D&D?
gosh.
Like, is
Yeah.
it a
Yeah.
Christian church?" She's like, "Yeah." So
Yeah.
here's this kid who's not religious in any way, but coming to play D&D. And then we actually didn't see her for a while, and we were having a movie night. We all went out to the movies, and she came and said, "Hey, where have you been? We've missed you in D&D." And she said, "Oh," she's like, "this specific night I had a date with my girlfriend." And I was like, "Okay, cool. Like, hope to have you back in D&D." Like,
Yeah.
here's this girl
Exactly.
who knows we're a Catholic church. I'm assuming she knows like what we believe. But like the fact that we were able to create an atmosphere, an environment of welcoming, these people, these two young kids, was a win for me, just because they felt that welcome
Yeah.
at a church, which usually isn't, the
Yeah.
lived experience.
Yeah. That's
Um,
right. That's exactly right.
yeah, just yeah, go on.
I wish I had fostered something that deep. We got a little political. I mean, here in the South, right in the middle of the Bible Belt, we came down pretty hard on some of the more sensitive issues, and I regret how I handled those myself. I also regret that I wasn't able to introduce D&D to my teens, because I myself didn't get introduced to it until like 3 or 4 years ago. So
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
I mean, and I love it. We did Magic the Gathering. That was our big thing. So, we like, I brought my decks, and then we would actually go shopping with the kids to the local comic book store, and we just
That's
buy
cool.
decks. We'd do cards. Like, we'd have tournaments.
Yeah.
Our lock-ins, like seriously, lock-ins, 12 hours of just playing Magic. It was
Oh
amazing.
man.
It was so good. But one thing that I cringe, a memory I cringe looking back on, is one of the kids came up to me, and I was locking up the church at the end of the night, like I always do. And he's like, "Hey, can I talk to you?" I was like, "Yeah, just walk with me." And he's like, "I need to tell you something." I was like, "All right, yeah." He's like, "I'm gay." And I was just like, "All right, I'm right-handed. I don't care." So I just kept on walking. And I was like, that's such a horrible response. Like, I didn't, like, this is a big deal.
Yeah.
And I didn't treat it like such.
Yeah.
I treated it like something
Like you're
so
left-handed.
so something so mundane,
Yeah.
right? Something, and I wish I could take that back and actually like stopped myself and engaged with him and just like talked with him, be like, "Well, thank you for telling me. Like, that's a really big deal. Like, that's hard." But I am grateful that he was, but I wish I had handled that a little differently.
Yeah.
So even with friends, coming out, how I reacted even 5 years ago would be so different than what I would choose to do today.
Mhm.
And that's being able to create a environment of welcome. Because at what point do you sacrifice a relationship to teach them something they already know?
Mhm.
Like, what good will it do feeling, "Oh, you're gay"? Well, the church teaches those are intrinsically disordered desires, and you have to do XYZ, and you can't act on your thoughts or your feelings, and you can't have a relationship with anybody. You can't have a romantic relationship. And like, what good would that have done? Like, what good would that do, period, to anybody who is making themselves vulnerable in the moment and like literally ripping their heart out to show you, like, this is who I am, and I'm terrified to tell you, but I have to, because it's who I am. Like, being this strict rule following, like condemning, like it doesn't do any good if we cannot have that relationship. And because like, how would you respond to anybody else who's like, "Chris, by the way, I'm getting a divorce." What would your response be? Well, hush, well, the church teaches against divorce. And like, although technically you can obtain a civil divorce, you are not legally allowed to remarry in the church without being guilty of adultery. So I hope you don't think of that. Like,
Mhm.
what good would that do? Like, my heart is broken. Like, my wife and I have this irreparable marriage and I am in mourning. I'm grieving. And like I'm looking for somebody to confide in, to share my hurt, to shoulder my burden with me,
Mhm.
and if not, to just listen and to pray with me or to pray for me. Like, I'm not coming to somebody to tell them something, to hear them like list off a series of rules of things I cannot do. Like, and when we meet people with that, we drive them further away from the church. We send them so far down. It's like, it's one of Jesus's condemnations of the Pharisees.
Mhm.
You wicked Pharisees, you go out to proselytize the nations, and you make the child you convert twice as much a child of hell as yourself. Like, you bind up burdens that are too heavy to bear, and you do not bear them yourself. Like, that's exactly where we are, and we have to not do that
Mhm.
anymore.
Yeah.
We have to be Christ. And who is Christ? Like, I'm not saying like love excuses everything, but it invites, it
Mhm.
comforts the afflicted. And then once you have that relationship, that love can afflict the comfortable and draw you nearer into conversion and repentance. It's not going to be done by meeting them, by throwing the catechism or canon law in somebody's face.
Mhm. Yeah, because at what point in our own personal lives did that work? When did I make like a real
Exactly.
change where someone
Damn
just
it.
like
Yes.
was
You're
a
like,
jerk to my face?
I will spend 15 minutes like just like ranting, and you synthesize it in a single sentence, and I hate it, but you're so good at it. Like,
What
that's exactly it.
what you said about the divorce, I did. I had a friend who, one of my closest friends, who came in like, I think he did it individually. He told all of us like, "Hey, we're getting divorced," and I did that. I said, "Well, you need to fight and you need to do this. And guess what?
Yeah.
If you get
Yeah.
remarried, I'm not going to the wedding." Like, what?
Damn.
And it wasn't
Damn.
until
Damn.
years later, thank you, Catching Foxes. Like they had a
Yeah.
spectacular
Yeah.
interview with this guy. I think he might have even been a Steubenville student. Um, but he was married, and his wife wanted a divorce, and he did not want one. In that case, you really have no power. If someone wants to divorce you, like, you really
Yeah.
can't really do much against it. And so he
Tragic.
shared
Yeah.
his experience of like the divorce, and then losing family, losing friends, having all this judgment, and then losing like your kids being brought up in this place where you used to be invited to family gatherings or not,
Yep.
friend gatherings with couples, and now you're not. Uh, and it really, because he was showing how like just remember, there's always two sides to the story,
Yeah.
and what a person needs in this moment is support.
Yes.
Both sides, like the both sides, who are like, all they need from you is support in the moment. And I was just like, I'm a dick. That's exactly what I did not
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
And it was one of the most humbling things I've done, where it broke me. And I actually called him. I was like, "Hey, like, I know I haven't seen you in a while," and he just had kind of really cut himself off.
Yeah.
And I was like, "Hey, I'd like to have dinner, grab a beer with you and your wife," and he actually said yes, and they both came. And I told him the exact same thing. I was like, "I know when you told me about the divorce, what I said, and I know all you needed in that moment was me as a friend, and me and my love for you and support, and I did not give it. I judged immediately, you know, um,
Yeah.
through the catechism, through the teachings in his face, and all you needed was a friend." And uh, it was huge, tears in the middle of flying saucer over beers and pretzels, just like this moment of healing, and it's really like mended our relationship. But it wasn't seeing the person as an image bearer. It was seeing them
Yeah.
as, what the church
A
says.
rule breaker. Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a beautiful opportunity, and really a blessed one, because there are so many people in my life that I've lost because of my arrogance,
Mm.
you know, and there are so many people that I desperately want to reconcile with, and I have no way of doing it
Mm.
because they've completely cut me out of their life, and for just reasons. I don't blame them at all, for the person I was. But, I've really, I want to repent of that and repair that, because those relationships that I sacrificed were valuable to me. And that's I think what it comes down to ultimately, like today, something I've learned, especially over the past 6 years, that some relationships are far more valuable to me than sharing an opinion about politics. Like, I mean, even some of my own family, like I refuse to talk politics with them, because at the drop of a hat, we will just be screaming at each other, and it's going to damage our relationship. And I don't want that. I want them in my life. I want to be in their life. And I know that this could destroy that. And I don't want it to, and when it comes to faith things where I'm divided with other family about my faith, when it comes down to it, they know what I believe. To a degree, they might believe a caricature of what I believe, but they have an idea of who I am as Catholic. They know I'm Catholic. I don't need to treat every moment of sharing as an opportunity to get into an argument about theology. Because that's not what relationships are. Yeah. Like the relationships are not this battle. Like, nobody wants that. That's exhausting. That's mentally, physically, spiritually exhausting to do that with somebody all the time. And I hate that I was that person for so many people,
Yeah. I know we're coming up on a couple hours, so stop. I have a few more questions, but stop me if we need to.
Sure. Lightning round. Let's go.
Yeah. Like I mentioned earlier, you do such a good job of quoting source documents. How would you encourage people to do that on their own, other than subscribing to your Instagram channel and following along? When it comes to a topic, an instance in the news or whatever, how would you encourage people doing their own research on encyclicals and documents, right? Catechism, Vatican II document? How do people go about doing that? Your normal everyday Catholic who didn't go to SUM though.
That's the big one, right?
Yeah. Or St. Thomas here in Houston, shout out.
Yeah, or Christendom or any other Catholic university. But yeah, that's hard, because a lot of people today, their first inclination is to go to social media, Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, Instagram. My first piece of advice would be get away from those. Like, don't go there. For somebody who's unfamiliar, start with the Catechism. The Catechism that we have, in my youth ministry, I bought catechisms in bulk and I would just hand them out. Like, if you don't have a catechism in your home, you need to change that. Like, sure, it's online. You can download an app with a catechism, but the book is, I'm old fashioned. I like books. Start with the Catechism. It has a topical index. If you got a question about something, go to the index in the back, look it up, and then go to where it references. And it references by paragraph number, not by page number. And then in that paragraph that you read, it's likely an entire section. It's usually not limited to just a single paragraph. You have an entire section of church teaching filled with footnotes. All of those footnotes point to other liturgical or theological or magisterial documents.
Or scriptural.
Or scripture. Yeah, thank you. And so then what you do, if you really want to study, is you look at those footnotes, then you go to the source material. You read the source material. Well, surprise, magisterial documents have pages of endnotes, because they're citing something else. And so you can follow that red line of continuity in our theology very, very far back. And eventually, you could land on the church fathers. You could land on the words of Christ himself in scripture. So start with the Catechism, start with a topical index. That's a starting point. And that's another important note, is that the Catechism is just the beginning of theology. It's not the end of theology. So some people will treat catechism as the final word.
Mm.
And they'll say, this is what the catechism says, end of story. Well, and you're just like, well, there's more to the story than that. The catechism is a summary of church beliefs. It's not monolithic. Like, we have all of these documents that have informed this one paragraph that you're referencing. We have 2,000 years of history that have informed this one paragraph that you're referencing. So start there. There are some great books to read. I always recommend, well, first, the Bible. Like, seriously, Catholics, we need to read our Bibles. I think one of the habits, one of the temptations that Catholics have is to only rely on liturgy to hear the word of God, which is fine, but it is not taking advantage of how available Christ makes himself in Scripture. And we have so many printings, like the Bible is so available to us. We really need to spend more time with the word of God. Second to that, if you want to study theology, there's a book by Frank Sheed called Theology for Beginners. Fantastic. Very accessible, very easy to read. It's very short. I don't even think it's like more than 200 pages. If it is, it's just barely over 200 pages. And it's a great summary of theology, like just like the basics, like bam, bam, bam. Here's what the church believes. Here's why she believes it. Very succinct, very easy to grasp. And then, like, from there, like, we have 2,000 years of history of writing, of great theological minds, towering intellects who have written about our Lord, who have written about God, who have written about the church, who have written about, how a human, how a citizen interacts in a society as a Catholic. So go there, and stay off of social media to begin with, because that's just because we have to be aware of our biases and our tendencies, right? When we're challenged on something, we tend to retreat back to what we know and look for an authority that we trust who says something about what we just heard, instead of actually challenging ourselves to look at the thing that makes us uncomfortable, right?
We'll find the person or website or a link or whatever that's going to align with what we think
exactly
makes us comfortable.
Exactly. And the reality is, like, even if you go to the church, like, you go to the church documents, you go to the source material, you're going to be met with something that will make you uncomfortable, like, especially if you're in the conservative circle, right?
Something like nuance.
Yes, like a little nuance. Like, and that's where we are. You said this at the beginning, and so we're coming full circle, but we are, like, if we are Catholics, if we're really living our faith, we are going to find ourselves politically homeless. We will not find a home in the Republican Party or in the Democrat Party. We will not find a home in conservatism or liberalism. We are homeless because the church is too conservative for liberals and too liberal for conservatives. Like, that's what it comes down to, because the church is universal, and the church has the benefit of hindsight of 2,000 years of history and of having to navigate the relationship of the church and the state, like, where the state was killing us, and then where the state adopted us, and then we consolidated political power. We became the Holy Roman Empire, and that crashed and burned. And, now we're in the post-Enlightenment era where, we have this pluralism that flourishes, and the church has written about that. John Paul II is a brilliant mind on the subject. Benedict XVI as well. They have incredible stuff. Even Pope Francis, what he writes, challenges me to the core. I remember reading one of his earliest homilies when he came into his pontificate, and it just shook me to my core. And it was exactly about what we've been talking about, that those who live only in the world of theology have closed their heart to Christ. It was something to that effect. I don't remember exactly what it was, but I read the homily and I was in tears in the chapel. Like, just like, this is me. Like, I have built a fortress of theology and arguments, and I have not made room for the person of Christ.
Yeah.
And I was just like, man,
Yeah. Just two more. In the world of social media, and I've dealt with this myself. I am not a talking head, and I'm not a social media person. But the idea of, do I have to post? Do I have to comment on this issue or that issue? And if I don't, am I a bad person? Am I not representing the faith, the church? Am I not supporting the downtrodden because I don't say something on social media? What are your thoughts on that? Because you very much utilize OK Catholic to do that. But I've struggled with that myself. I know the answers for myself because I think the answer is very subjective. I know for myself, I've had to pull out of social media for my own mental health. Just had to get away from all the BS being said to make sure I'm not being affected in a negative way, and then that reverberates and affects everyone around you. Now, what are your thoughts on that? Like, do I have to post? Do I have to say something?
No, I think you're absolutely right. It's very subjective, and where we approach this as Catholics, as Christians, could be this remnant of guilt, because in the Gospels we read, I think it's in Matthew 10, Jesus says, whoever denies me before men, I will deny before my Father in heaven. So we have this idea like, oh my gosh, I will not deny Christ. I have to defend him at every opportunity. So if somebody insults him, even online, like a person I have no relationship with, a person who's going to completely ignore my comment and, be even more turned off to Christianity, I have to defend Christ. That thought is prevalent. We have to defend Christ, and we will make up justifications of why we can be assholes online. Jesus flipped tables. He got angry. That's the example I follow. Or whoever does not hate his mother and father is not worthy of me. You're just like, okay, let's look at context. Anyway, I think it's a matter of prudential judgment and the platform you have and the relationships you have. A lot of times, well, actually, this has been a habit of mine, for better or for worse, it's just me shouting into the wind, right? Like I tend not to comment on people's posts because that's not a platform for conversation. Like people aren't going to listen. Like if I disagree with somebody in their post and I post it publicly, well, there's a couple of problems with that. Number one is that I'm posting my disagreement publicly. So now this person has to choose whether or not they want to double down and defend themselves because they made a public statement and now they're being challenged publicly. So they have to respond to that challenge publicly. And so that immediately is going to be disingenuous because we are tempted to pride. Like we want to defend ourselves when we feel attacked. That's our natural inclination. I don't fault anybody for that, but there's the level of disconnect, right? And then it's going to go back and forth. And we've seen this play out. We've seen it on Facebook. We've seen the comments that go back and forth from, even if people know each other, like you double down, you're challenged publicly, you're going to respond publicly. So I don't do that. I think that's not conducive to any type of fruit. I don't put people on blast. There's this really bad habit some people have of just tagging people either in their posts or in their stories or their tweets and like just putting them on blast. And as Catholics, we have a very fun way. If we were on the receiving end of that, we would call it cancel culture. But when we give it to somebody, we call it calling them out, quote unquote. Yeah. This is fraternal correction. This is me admonishing my brother or sister. When reality, it's not. It's publicly putting somebody on blast and insulting them. Like that's not the way to pursue conversation. Like if I wanted a conversation with you, Chris, like I would not go with a megaphone into my streets saying, Chris Donato has better hair than me and I challenge him on that, yeah, exactly. Like it's like just the context of it. It's just bad. It's not going to bring anybody to conversion. Nobody's going to look at my story and be like, oh shit, like 1,000 people saw this story where this guy is calling me out. I guess I better rethink my life and that thing I posted. Like that never happens. Like when in the history of internet communication has that happened? None times. Like it hasn't happened. And that's not how we relate to each other.
Do you think there are people who are obligated? to say something, because even knowing that it is very subjective for myself, like I don't think everyone should. It's not healthy. It's not safe for everyone to go commenting and posting. But I have experienced myself when like I wanted so and so to say, like, why hasn't this person said something? Why isn't this bishop, this social media person, who I may enjoy, look up to, reference, like, why hasn't this person said something? So it's kind of like even myself, like, being a little two-faced, like, no, we don't always have to. Why isn't this person said something? You know?
No, that's a good point. I wasn't thinking about people like, because that's the difference, right? These are people in positions of authority who are public figures, right? So I would say those people, they're in a different, you know, they have different measures of responsibility as public figures with authority, particularly our priests, our bishops, our Holy Father. So yeah, absolutely. If you hold that position of authority, and as a bishop, you are responsible for your people, your territory, the catechesis and the spiritual formation of your people, then sure, of course, yeah, there's a certain obligation you have to respond publicly. Whether or not Twitter, Instagram, Facebook are the most effective means of communicating that may be a different question. Because then it becomes, if you want to post something, fine. Like a bishop wants to make a statement that's specific to his diocese, like COVID. Hey, we heard from the CDC. As such, in my authority as bishop, I am instituting these. Here is the link to my official whatever. That's fine. That's responsible. That's what he should do. We should know what our bishop is saying about certain things, about racial injustice, like wherever the diocese, where George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, Keith Scott, wherever these things were happening, the bishop has a responsibility to his territory to respond to public injustices, to respond to developments in the world. The issue is if that bishop should then engage with the retweets or the replies that come on that challenge him, or the tweets and replies that troll him intentionally, like don't do that. No good comes of that ever. Like people just show their asses, and it's nothing ever good comes of that.
Yeah. Last question. What's next for OK Catholic? I know you said you really don't have like a big grand scheme of what you're doing just kind of day to day, but I mean, you as a creative, you've got to have some sort of, I'm assuming, some sort of idea of where you want to go, things you want to do, restructuring. I don't know. What's next? Is there anything next, or just day by day?
Yeah. Right now I'm taking it day by day because I have no plan. Like when we started the YouTube channel, I had a plan. I had a backlog of scripts. I knew exactly the topics I wanted to discuss. I knew exactly how I wanted to shoot everything. I knew how I wanted to edit and develop my title screens, my end screens, my thumbnails, like everything. With OK Catholics, it's really just kind of reactive more than anything else, like commenting on the public issues of the day. And lately, this is, again, we're coming full circle talking about something I mentioned at the beginning, is I really do want to be more productive than destructive with my time, because I have developed a little following and I have had great engagements with people. Like I've met plenty of people, you being one of them. So I've had this opportunity to like meet with you in this capacity and share this conversation, which is a wonderful blessing. Thank you again.
Thank you.
But also I've been able to meet with other people, and just recently, I've been able, I have been able to offer material help to other people, like Katie Prejean McGrady, who just suffered in Louisiana from the storms and the flooding. Like Chanel worked with somebody to get a GoFundMe going, and she posted it, and then I just reposted that, and I was just encouraging anybody who follows me to go and give what material goods you can to Katie in the form of donations. And if not, don't feel guilty. You don't have an obligation to do this, but pray. That's the least we could do as Catholics, as a church community, as a believing community. And then there was another person. I'm sorry, his name escapes me because I just learned about him last night. Who there was a sudden death of somebody. Maybe I don't want to say it was murder because I can't recall exactly, but he was raising funds to pay for the funeral services of this person. And I was like, this is a worthy cause. Like, let's rally behind this guy too. So I know I was able to contribute to that good materially. And I had at least 5, 6 followers reach out to me specifically saying, thank you for posting this. Like, because you did, I went and I supported this person. And I was like that's in the grand scheme of things, in terms of KPIs or whatever, for almost 2,000 followers and only having 6 actually engage, that's not great. But to me, that's amazing. To me, that is incredible, because these are 6 people that I've talked with, who I've had conversations with in the past, who I've laughed with, I've cried with, who I've never met in real life. We don't know each other, but we share these frustrations, we share these tragedies. And they said, like, because of you, I did this. And I was like, thanks be to God. That's it. It is right and just for us to do this. We take care of our own as Catholics, and who is our own? Like, everybody. We are universal. We are all image bearers. Like, we like, our faith demands a certain level of response, and to take care of people when they are in need is one of them. But no definitive plans. I thought of, like, just deleting Instagram, honestly, because sometimes I just get so frustrated, and I'm just like, what am I doing? Just screaming into the wind. Nothing is changing. But things are changing, and if I could just be a voice of reason and rationality, and something that represents what the church actually teaches, then and if people can get some fruit from that, then I'll just keep doing what I'm doing until something changes. There are better people, there are holier people than me that you can follow, no question.
But I think other than building a prayer life, like we mentioned, another good thing that I think has come out of COVID is the realization of people like ourselves who aren't satisfied with what's already out there, what's being said, realizing we don't have a home, and finding people who are like-minded. I guess that's us finding our comfort.
Yeah, a little
comfort in the discomfort of the injustice, the things we see. Yes. And that content coming out, what you're doing. I know I could pull up tons of things, like Letitia.
Letitia.
Yeah. What she's been doing. And even now with Ike and Dolo, who's starting their new podcast. Yeah. I'm super
love Ike. Love Ike.
Was it distant? What's it called? I forget what it's called.
Not disinvited.
Disinhearted.
Something.
Dissing something. Yeah. Yeah. Just like that coming out, and like, let's talk about these complicated topics and not just be quoting scripture and catechism, but getting to like, we're all image bearers. How do we, with experiences and histories and wounds and things we're tethered to and untethered to, like, let's have these conversations. And they're difficult, but we're gonna do it. I think that's a great thing that's come out of this. But it's 9:00 here, so it's 10:00 there.
Yeah.
I seriously want to say thank you. Like, fan is not the word I want to use, but I love what you do. I'm hoping we can be friends. The Glazes were like, yeah, we really hope we can actually travel up to North Carolina and spend time with them. And I was like, I'm gonna jump in your trunk.
Oh, dude, that'd be amazing. Yeah. We've thought of making a trip down to Texas. So once things reopen, Becky's transitioning to her new job. So PTO is up in the air, but we definitely, like, I want to visit Danny and Anna so bad. Like, that's one of the fruits, right? Like, we met them only because we started a YouTube channel, and we developed an incredible friendship with them, So the social media can be very good. It can. We have a great capacity for benevolence. So we just have to tap into that and utilize that more than letting the algorithm influence how we respond to people, which is typically negatively. And I'm guilty of, but I'm grateful that you found me and you reached out. Like, I'm glad I could be something positive, for somebody. So I'm really humbled and grateful for that. So thank you, Chris.
Yeah, thank you for your time. There are other topics I love to hit on with you, or actually the both of you. Your experiences as a couple, and I'd love to do that in the near future. But just thank you for your time and your time on social media and for what you do. I mean, I've benefited. I know, My wife has started following, and even she's like, "Did you see what OK Catholic put up there?" like we've experienced the fruits of it. So just encouraging what you're doing, and yeah, hope we can do it again. And I hope that Lagavulin was delicious.
I'd love to. And it was. Lagavulin is God's gift to man. It's just incredible. The best Isla whiskey in the world, and I am not exaggerating. Chris, thank you so much for your time. I really do appreciate it. I'd love to come on again. Let me know how this podcast does. And let me know when it drops too. I'd love to promote it, and to promote you. Like, I just want to lift up other creative voices as well. And like I said, just be more productive with what I have. So thank you.